What should the expectations be for each of the Louisville men's basketball team's newcomers next season? Well, we'll talk about that on today's episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome into another episode of the Locked On the Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. I serve as a credential media member for Cardinal Sports Zone. I also do some PA announcing work for the university in various sports. I want to take this time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On the Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. As I mentioned, we are talking about what the expectations should be for each of the 9 Louisville men's basketball teams newcomers next season. We'll divide the episode up into 3 segments as we always do and discuss 3 players per segment. So to begin, we will start out by discussing the D1 transfers. So Skyy Clark, Tre White, and Danilo Jovanovich. Before we talk about those 3, I do want to preface this by saying that I think we have to be realistic here. I understand a lot of people have high hopes for all 9 newcomers, and I do as well. But I'm also going to be realistic because very rarely do you ever see a rotation in college basketball of every single scholarship player. And I just don't necessarily think that that's realistic to suggest that's going to happen because all 4 of the returning players, Brendan Huntley Hatfield, J.J. Traynor, Emmanuel Okorafor, and Mike James, all 4 of them are projected at least to see somewhat of a substantial role. I think that multiple of them will start next season. So it begs the question is, well, how much can be expected from all 9 of them, considering that not all 9 are going to play a significant role? I'm not going to suggest that they are. However, like I'm trying to say is that just because, maybe I suggest that, the expectation for one player is that he's likely going to redshirt this season or he's not going to see a significant role. That is not me coming onto this show and saying that that is a bad player, that he's not going to be good, because at times you have to understand, it takes maybe a couple of years for certain players to see a substantial role. We've seen it throughout the past couple decades. We've seen it through the entirety of the Louisville men's basketball program. So I just ask that when you're listening to this, try to understand my rationale as well. I'm going to try to incorporate context, positional, scenarios to where, certain players might, play a certain position and that position might be log jammed a little bit when it comes to the minutes distribution. So we'll break it down, beginning with Skyy Clark. Skyy Clark played 13 games for Illinois this past season, started 12 of them, averaged 7 points, 3.7 rebounds per game, respectively. Took a leave of absence, stepped away from the program after dealing with some personal issues. He has since committed to Louisville and has claimed that the ACL tear that had been bothering him since senior year of high school is no longer doing so. He is fully healthy, and, well, I think that we need to expect that Skyy Clark is going to average in double digits this season. There is a good chance that he will be leading the Cardinals in scoring, in my opinion, because of the role that he's going to be entrusted to play. He's essentially, I'm not going to say having to shoulder the responsibility of doing what L. Ellis had to do last year, because let's be honest, L. Ellis pretty much for the majority of the season was the Cardinals offense. He had to score over 20 points per game for Louisville to have a chance. I don't think that that's going to have to be the case for Skyy Clark this season. However, he's going to have to be one of the main scorers on this team, and he's also going to have to create for others as well. That's why sometimes I don't necessarily like to talk about statistical averages when it comes to expectations, because if a player doesn't reach a certain number, you may think, well, he's not necessarily living up to the expectations, and sometimes that's just flat out not true. Maybe he's exceeding expectations, but it really can't be determined unless you're watching games and not just box score watching. So ultimately, I think that statistics do tell some sort of the story, but they're not the end-all be-all. I think that Skyy Clark is going to average in double figures. That should be the expectation, is that he sees a pretty decent jump between statistical numbers year one to year two. Also, I think that improving that assist number, 2 assists per game for a guy that's going to have to essentially probably be the Cardinals' number one point guard right away. So I think that you're going to have to see those numbers probably double. In terms of assists per game. Scoring wise, I mean, who knows? It might not necessarily be far-fetched to say that scoring numbers are going to double as well. But at the end of the day, let's be realistic here. I think that if he were to average 13, 14 points per game, 4 to 5 assists per game, I think that that's pretty solid statistical numbers. I want to see him, obviously look solid on the defensive side of the ball. I think one expectation should be the jump in efficiency when it comes to shooting. He's at 40% from the field, 33% from behind the arc, 70% from the free throw line. I would like to see those numbers improve, especially with more shots as well. I think that for Skyy Clark, the name of the game is just adjusting to a new role, to where he goes from just being a starter to being one of the guys that the team relies on to, create that offensive flow. So expectation for Skyy Clark, scoring in double figures and doubling those assist numbers while on better efficiency. Moving on along, Tre White from USC, the freshman, started in 29 of the 33 games for the Trojans this past season. 9 points per game, 5.1 rebounds per contest, 47% from the field, 27% from behind the arc, and 69% from the free throw line. So 6'7", native of Dallas, Texas. I've said on this show, on the most recent episode, when we talked about breaking down the potential starting lineups, I think along with Skyy Clark, the other penciled-in starter that is likely going to start hands down is Tre White. I look for him to take a big jump from year one to year two, like Skyy Clark. I think that personally, we talked about Skyy Clark being the potential number one scorer. I think that Tre White could also be in that conversation. I would expect him to get in double-digit scoring as well. I think for him, the expectation should be just consistently growing his game outright. And what I mean by that is becoming a more efficient shooter, becoming more of a threat from the perimeter, because he has shown that he can hit the deep ball, but he's not necessarily being extremely efficient while doing so. So I think that that's the main thing to focus on, is three-point shooting has to improve, especially the role that he's going to be playing for the Cardinals this season, where he's likely going to be one of the main offensive, scorers on the team. So the expectation for Tre White, statistical jump in scoring to where he's averaging at least, maybe 13, 14 a game. I understand, this is a very balanced roster, but you still need those number one scorers. You're replacing, L. Ellis's scoring production last season. The only returning scorer, actually the only scorer from last season in any aspect of college ball or D1 college ball, Mike James was the only one that scored or averaged in double figures. So something to focus on there. But I look for Tre White to improve that three-point shooting and get into, I think it's not far-fetched to say, the 33 to 36 range. There's not necessarily an issue with shot mechanics. I would like to see him become more of an initiator for himself as well offensively. So that's something to focus on. I think for Skyy Clark and Tre White, it's about jumping up statistically while also accepting a larger role. The last person we're going to talk about in this segment is Danilo Jovanovich from Miami. This is an interesting situation because last year he only played one game, appeared in one game, played 2 minutes, did not record a single statistic, didn't take a single shot in that game against St. Francis early on in the season. So, the 6'8" forward from Milwaukee, there is a situation where he did get hurt early on. Jim Larinaga wanted to redshirt him, so, didn't necessarily play him. But that does make you wonder what the expectation should be. I think the expectation, without being too optimistic, but also doing due diligence, and understanding that this is a player with pretty solid talent. I don't necessarily think he's going to be a starter. I don't think he is going to be in contention for starting until at the very earliest, the end of the season. I think he is a player that's geared towards producing in the future. I think the expectation should be for Danilo to be a solid member of the second squad, the second rotation. Statistically, I don't necessarily feel comfortable putting a statistical number on that yet because he really hasn't played much at all. Not the highest rated guy coming out of high school. So that's something that I know a lot of people are pretty high on Jovanovich's game, and I think that there are a lot of, interesting pieces to his game, like his ability to create his own shot for his size, his mobility, underrated facilitating ability, but I don't necessarily see him more than just a role player this season, which there's nothing wrong with that because you've got solid guys in the front court. I think that he should be giving you, up to 10 solid minutes per game. For the Cardinals, where he is, being a high energy guy, a guy that stretches the floor, helps that offensive cohesion while also being, a spot up 3-point shooter as well. So I don't want to be too, optimistic, but I also don't want to undersell the talent there either because he is a pretty solid player. I just think that he's more of a player that's going to be geared for the future. So, 3 more players we're going to talk about here shortly. That is Trentyn Flowers, Dennis Evans, and Kaleb Glenn. We'll talk about those 3 here momentarily after we talk about our friends over at Birddogs. Birddogs is an opportunity that you need to jump on now. A pair of shorts and a pair of pants that not only has tremendous fit, but also comfortable, and not only that, but versatile as well. You feel like you look better. It's a confidence booster. The stretchy fabric makes your legs look great, and they're comfier than other shorts and pants. They give you the freedom to wear one pair of shorts or pants on the golf course, to a meeting, or even hanging out with friends all in one setting. Bert Kreischer shows this in the way that he goes to his lake house wearing Birddogs. He'll go for a swim. He'll smoke a cigar. He'll grill burgers, and then he'll chill with his family, all in the shorts that he associates with in the summer. Those are Birddogs. Opportunity now. You go to birddogs.com/lockedoncollege, and when you enter the promo code LockedOnCollege, they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. Once again, LockedOnCollege is the promo code at birddogs.com/lockedoncollege to get that free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every order. All right, discussing more expectations, or what they should be, for each of the 9 Louisville men's basketball team newcomers this offseason. Like I said, there are 9 of them, 6 via the high school and JUCO ranks, 3 transfers from the D1 ranks. We just talked about the D1 guys. Let's talk about some of the members of Flyville 23. The first one up is 5-star reclassified prospect Trentyn Flowers, a 6'8" player from Charlotte, North Carolina. When we talked about possible starting lineups, he was a player that was mentioned a ton. In one of the lineups, he did not start. In 2 of them, he did. I think it really just depends on what the lineup is going to be. If Kenny Ball elects to go with a smaller, more versatile lineup, utilizing more big guards and wings, I think that Trentyn Flowers is definitely in line to start. If it comes down between a battle with him and Mike James for that backcourt starting spot with Skyy Clark and Tre White, I think it's up in the air, and I probably would go with the veteran, the guy who averaged in double figures last year for Louisville, to start the season out. Regardless if he starts or not, I think that Trentyn Flowers is going to be playing a ton of basketball year 1 for Louisville because the Cardinals need him to. Being 6'8", being able to create his own shot, the ability to utilize his size to finish in traffic around the rim. I like his ability to be a possible secondary ball handler on the court, the ability to, be a possible tertiary initiator, while also possessing solid defensive potential as well. I think that it might be a little bit unfair to suggest that he's going to be responsible to shoulder a lot of the scoring, deviation year 1. I think that it is a very real possibility. I think that, Kenny Payne and company are going to utilize his ability to create his own offense. So expectations-wise, what are we looking at here? I'm not going to come out and say that I think that he should be a double-digit scorer year one. Because, I mean, he could be, and I'm not saying that he can't be. But when you look at Skyy Clark, Tre White, J.J. Traynor, Mike James, Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, those five are going to, be involved in the offensive picture to a solid extent. So you wonder how much Louisville is going to be able to, deviate that scoring responsibility, that scoring load. So how much does Trentyn Flowers, how much does he average? I think that, averaging 8 points per game, 4 to 5 rebounds per game, a handful of assists, while shooting respectable numbers, at least in the mid 30s from the 3-point line, low 40s at the least from the field. I think that you have to be realistic, but you can be realistic and look at these statistical numbers and also suggest that he's going to play a large role. Just because I'm saying that he's only going to average 8, 4, and 2 on pretty solid shooting doesn't necessarily mean that that's not a solid role. That's a pretty decent role for a true freshman that, is a borderline 5-star player, which he is a 5-star player. But I do think that he's going to be a player that, is going to be able to start putting it together in ACC play, sort of how Mike James did. He might struggle early on, getting his footing in the college game, but I do think that he's going to play a solid role moving forward. So another player is Dennis Evans. As I mentioned, Dennis Evans, obviously right now the number one shot blocker on the team, 27th ranked player in the country according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. 7'1" from Riverside, California, played at Hillcrest Prep. Revered as one of the best, if not the best shot blocker in the 2023 class. I think he is Louisville's probably only true center. Because I think Emmanuel Okorafor, J.J. Traynor, Brandon Huntley-Hatfield can play that position, but I look at them as more of fours, maybe a small ball 5 for J.J. and Emmanuel, but 7-footer that can block shots, protect the rim, and rebound at a high rate is pretty efficient around the rim as well. It's no secret that sometimes it takes, freshman big men some time to get acclimated with the college game. Obviously, Dennis Evans is raw offensively, so there is some question as to what that role is going to be. I think that there is an avenue to which we could possibly see Dennis Evans starting some games in 2023-24, but I wouldn't necessarily saying that it's probable. I think that he's going to play a pretty solid role off the bench in the second unit, which, is going to provide immediate rim protection and rebounding the basketball, which are two aspects of the game that Louisville did not do well last season. So I think that that's going to be a breath of fresh air. So you're going to see, depending on, the minutes, I think averaging 5 rebounds per game, depending on how many minutes he gets, maybe a block, maybe 2 blocks, depending, all depends on how many minutes of nightly action he's playing, right, with the opportunity. So I think 2 blocks, 5 rebounds, and then let's say points per game. I mean, trying to be fair, but also not trying to be too optimistic, and, being a sunshine pumper. I think, 5 to 6 points per game as a true freshman. Obviously, I think he's going to be efficient around the rim, efficient in, alley-oop opportunities, but still, he has to work on that post game. The range is there, but I'm not sure that it's going to consistently be there year one. It'll be interesting to see how opposing defenses play Dennis Evans. So I think that, 5, 6 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, 2 blocks per contest in a solid second unit role would be more than solid for the Cardinals, obviously playing a decent role for Louisville in that mix, a true freshman center that utilizes his defensive ability immediately to see the floor while his offensive game grows. So the other freshman to talk about in this segment is hometown hero Kaleb Glenn, transferred to La Lumiere for his senior season after spending his first 3 at Mayo High School, my alma mater, the place that I announced basketball at the past 5 seasons. Ranked as the 72nd best prospect in the country, 6'6" forward. Obviously, like I mentioned, from the Ville, from the 502. Kaleb, I think, has pro potential. I think obviously he's going to be a guy that has a college-ready body, being 6'6", 210, has a solid physical frame. He has gotten better with each and every season. He's gotten better handles with each season. His perimeter shooting has gotten better. He's always been efficient around the rim. The question is, what is his role? Is he more of a small ball four? Is he more of a wing? Is he quick enough to be a wing? Is he big enough to be a small ball four? I think that you're hoping in Louisville's case that he turns out to be sort of a Shane Bohannon, Dwayne Sutton hybrid, to where he's, not necessarily the tallest guy, but he's extremely strong, extremely effective around the rim, both scoring and rebounding, and also, being able to be a solid defender. I think year one, I don't necessarily know what the rotation is going to offer him, because, you have a ton of, guys in those positions like Emmanuel Okorafor, J.J. Traynor, Brandon Huntley-Hatfield, Danilo Jovanovich, even Dennis Evans at the 5. Potentially Curtis Williams at the wing position, so on and so forth. So I wonder how much. I think he could possibly be a redshirt candidate, which is no testament to how good he is. I think that he can definitely be a fantastic player, but I think that he's going to be a guy that's probably going to be on the back end of that second rotation, unless he's showing that he can be like a JJ year one, to where, he plays some solid minutes, maybe up to 10 minutes per game, and he's giving you very good effort minutes, making the most out of his opportunities. That's something to focus on. I think he's a possible redshirt candidate, but it would not surprise me to see him carve out a role in that second unit, to where he's utilizing that strength, utilizing that motor to solidify his role on this team. So this is going to be one to watch for. But 3 more players to talk about before we do that. I want to thank you all again for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the Locked On Louisville podcast is free on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Final 3 to talk about: Koron Davis, Ty-Laur Johnson, and Curtis Williams Jr. Koron Davis is an X factor for this team, because statistically last season, he averaged 23.8 points per game at LA Southwest, JUCO or community college, 48% from the field, 33% from the 3-point line, 81% from the free throw line, 6.7 rebounds per game, 3.2 assists per game. However, Louisville was his only Division I offer. Not much other D1 interest. I heard that there was rumored that he had some, but Louisville was his only D1 offer that you can find on recruiting sites, and he was top 10 in the country, or I think actually bottom 10 in the country, in turning the ball over. He had 98 turnovers last season in 25 games, had an assist-to-turnover ratio of 0.8, which was 579th in the country, which not good whatsoever, but the statistics are there. A guy that is, 6'7", can play the 2 guard. I think that he projects to be more of a 2 guard than a 1 guard, because of that lack of, assist to turnover ratio. I think that he's going to be relied upon to be a bench scorer, to where you're looking at him to try to average in double figures. I think expectations wise should be solid, efficient stats, a spark plug off the bench, that gives you 7 to 10 points per game, respectively. Would it surprise me if he scored in double figures? No, but I think realistically speaking, you're looking at a guy who is probably flirting with double digits, but gives you a solid scoring punch off the bench. Moving on along, Ty-Laur Johnson, the most recent addition, 4-star point guard from the Bronx, 6 foot, from Overtime Elite. He actually played at Overtime Elite, 77th best player in the country, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. Reminds me a lot of like Keon Minifield last year, a guy that Louisville was rumored to before he went to Arkansas from Washington. A quick point guard that is really, really good facilitating the basketball. Not the biggest player, but is extremely shifty, hard to stay in front of, finishes well through contact, and also has shown that he has a solid perimeter shot as well. I think he's going to be the backup point guard for this team. He's going to, be a guy that averages in that 5 to 10 points per game role, maybe even more, depending on how well he transitions from the high school game to the college game. Put up 30 points on Rob Dillingham's team, held his own against the Thompson twins, that are going to both be top 10, maybe even top 5 NBA draft picks here in about a month. I think he's going to be the backup point guard for Louisville, playing a lot of significant minutes. Responsibility for him is going to be the backup point guard, to initiate offense, but also create it for himself as well. So I think, you're looking at a guy who's, maybe a 6-man, maybe a 7-man, but he's playing upwards of 20 minutes per game because you need that, initiator on the court. You could possibly even see him playing with Skyy Clark on the court sometimes, but a lot of hope for Ty-Laur Johnson year one. And then to conclude the show, Curtis Williams Jr., last but not least, 6'6", combo guard forward from Brother Rice High School in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, 76th ranked player in the country. Didn't necessarily have the greatest, summer AAU circuit in terms of shooting the basketball, which is something that is going to have to be worked upon. I think he's going to be a guy, also a potential redshirt candidate, not because he's not good enough, but because of the log jam at the position, maybe with the versatility that you're utilizing in the backcourt. Potentially there's a role there. But I like his defensive impact that he can make day one. Being 6'6", having solid instincts in terms of jumping passing routes, active hands, and a great understanding of team defense. I think that this could really be a player that, if he's going to see the court, it's going to be because, he's playing solid defense. I think the offensive game is obviously still a work in progress. He has shown that he can knock down the three-point ball, but he can also, get to the rim and finish through contact, solid in the mid-range as well. It's just a matter of showing that he can do that at the next level. So I look for him to possibly be a redshirt candidate, but would it surprise me to see him carve out a second role or a role in the second unit? No. I think that the thing we need to focus on here overall is that not every single one of these players is going to play a significant role. I know that there's going to be people that are sitting here thinking, well, Dalton's just a hater. He doesn't see the talent that Kenny Payne sees. And I'm not saying all 9 of these players are talented. Let's be honest. But if you're sitting here trying to tell me that all of the 9 players are going to play a significant role, along with those 4, and maybe even Hersey Miller, it's not going to happen. And if it does, that might be counterproductive because you're looking to probably get a rotation of probably 8 to 10 guys. That's a solid mark, because if you're playing 13 guys, how are you expecting any of those 13 to consistently be able to play in a good form? Because they're not playing as much as they should if there's 13 players consistently playing. So trying to be realistic here. Let me know, where do you agree? Where do you disagree? Because this show, as analytically driven as it is, I try to remain objective, but I like to see where people's heads are at. Who do you think is going to play the most significant roles from the 9 newcomers? Who are possible redshirt candidates? Let me know down in the comments. So, but that's going to wrap up today's episode of the show. Everyone have a great day. We'll see you right back here